You'll probably notice that these cartoonists are not old. That is not the case with some of the New Yorker cartoonists. Now, just to clarify for the audience, cartooning used to be, in the United States, if not a completely multitudinous thing, there were a lot of magazines to go to. There were places that you go to other than the New Yorker. And so what does a young cartoonist face if you want to try this? I mean, other than Playboy, which has a certain kind of joke, and a couple of other places, where else can you go?
Ooh.
Yeah.
I think y'all are it.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's graphic novels and then that avenue.
I mean, it's your Playboy.
Yeah.
So I just draw boobs on my rejects and send them on out.
All right, we're going to have a little exercise. We're going to show cartoons from each artist, one after the other, and maybe pause on one or two along the way, and also show some cartoons by artists that each of you particularly likes. We'll start with Drew Dernavich. Maybe we should lower the lights. Drew, you want to take us through these? Tell us a little bit what evil part of your imagination these come from. As you know, all of our guests, our rooms have unique themes. Yours is Last Night's Guest.
Yeah, this I like just because I was trying to think of what people have probably been to theme room hotels, and they usually like Elvis theme or Hollywood or whatever, and I tried to think what the grossest theme would be, and the theme would basically be that they didn't clean the room and they kind of fancied it up.
Okay.
So that's that.
Okay.
So is Cameron Diaz really a babe, or is that another thing that we've been led to believe by the biased media?
Yeah.
I was actually hoping that Cameron Diaz would buy the original version of this cartoon and become a collector.
She didn't buy it?
She didn't take the bait. No.
Okay.
We need a leader who is not afraid to dream incremental dreams. This one goes verse, chorus, train, verse, chorus, train. You know that those subway musicians are doing that. Overall, I think my life is stagnating in the right direction. And both this one and the one about the incremental dreams were done right after the crash. This one seemed like an appropriate reaction, that no one was really going anywhere, but that seemed to be okay at the time.
Drew, do you want to say a little bit about your style, which is very distinctive? It looks like a woodcut. How is this achieved? Why did you come to this way of drawing?
My original track that I was on was not comics, but fine art. I was going to be a master printmaker, or I was going to be teaching drawing in Italy or something, and comics were just kind of a hobby that I did to occupy myself. And eventually, at some point they switched. I thought comics was a more honest and better form of communication, even with humor. But
because you were reading what was leading you to that impression?
I was studying art, but I felt like I grew up on editorial cartoons, you know, Doug Marlette and Jeff McNelly, who did editorial cartoons and did
Right.
Shoe, and you know the stranger ones like Zippy, Pinhead, and I liked Matt Groening and his cartoon incarnation. And I felt like there was in comics there's more of there's a point you're making, and the reader had to get what that was. Whereas in fine arts, a lot of abstract painting and stuff, it was a lot more nebulous. And I liked the idea that in cartoons there's something to get, and so. I gravitated toward that, and I drew cartoony for a long time until finally I decided to combine the two and combine what I knew about printmaking, you know, which was making woodcuts, and then putting a caption.
Is that the way it's done, or
It's no. I couldn't afford the wood or have a place to store it. Really,
it'd be a lot of work to do a woodcut.
Yeah.
So you have to sort of you imitate the impression of a woodcut.
So yeah, it's called scratchboard. It's like the poor man's woodcut, and I use a really cheap student grade of scratchboard that students probably don't even use because it's really terrible.
You should know that these cartoonists each send in on a given week, I don't know how many roughs, often 10, 15 roughs, and these add up in a given week to hundreds of roughs from any number of cartoonists. Bob Mankoff then whittles that down to maybe 2 or 3 per artist, and then we have a cartoon meeting where we select, and very rarely does someone sell more than one in a given week, and often, unfortunately, because we can only print so many, much more often somebody will sell none. It's a very tough thing. It's a very tough thing. Go ahead.
It's a lot easier than the mechanical bull.
It's nothing like a good cat joke.
This one's Bob was raised in the wilderness by salmon.
So this is proof that cartooning can reach the existentialism and the inner life.
The idea of a high school debate team is funny just because no one, I'll speak for myself, I didn't know who I was in high school. I don't think most people know who they are. So the fact that you would be able to coherently choose a position on anything besides the state of your own identity is really fun.
Now this is a cartoon. Why don't you explain? Read out the caption and then talk about this artist.
So the caption, you can see the scenario, and the producer is saying, "Not bad, fellas. Let's do one more take with more emphasis on tone, harmony, melody, rhythm, composition, lyrics, musicianship, tempo, and originality." And I picked this not because it's the funniest cartoon ever. I couldn't pick out what I thought was the funniest cartoon, but this cartoon came at a time when when I grew up, I didn't read The New Yorker. I thought it was for intellectual, elitists who had no sense of humor. And it still might be, I'm not sure. But I had a terrible sense of humor, which is all kind of puns. And I thought every cartoon had about 5 jokes in it. And people kept telling me, your humor is similar to New Yorker humor as it got better.
Were you insulted?
No, I just said, no, it's not. They're not the same thing. And so I was drawing cartoons for years and years. At a certain point, I opened up, and this is one of the cartoons in the magazine, and I said, wow, it's really, there's a rock band in it. And that was not any kind of way that I would have written a cartoon in terms of, you kind of have to read the caption. It gets funnier as it goes along, and it was a totally different way to write a joke than I had done. So this was the first time I really got The New Yorker and thought this was where I wanted to be.
All right, Emily, you read it out forcefully and clearly.
It says, maybe if your creativity had fewer outlets, it would come out of you with more force. Looks like somebody's eyes are bigger than his liver.
There's nothing like a good drunk joke.
Right. You only regret the things you don't do, Johnson.
Emily, and how did you come to draw the way you draw? What are the decisions that you're making early on?
This is the best I can do. Yeah, I've always drawn. I'm an illustrator as well, but this is sort of I would say a mix between like my alt weekly style, which is a lot cruder, and like real drawing, like super detailed pencil work or whatever. So yeah, I sort of landed in the middle of those two things, I'd say, stylistically.
Tell me about the other stuff that you do now.
Well, the illustration work is pretty much straight up like, editorial illustration. I get an assignment, I draw for it, I pray, I get paid.
Right.
And then the alt weekly strip is filthy, just filthy. It's
really filthy?
It's like a 4-panel strip.
Do you ever think of doing graphic novels? Is that a form that interests you?
Well, these things ain't going to smoke for themselves was sort of like a graphic essay,
right?
Which I really enjoyed doing. So yeah, I mean, any way I can combine words and drawing in a lucrative manner, I'm all for. It's like the Family Circus meets The Wire, but on a cruise ship. Oh, well, this is going to be awkward.
Now, in cartooning, there are about, I don't know how many there are, 15, 20, 25 of these, of things that have been appearing in cartoons forever. Desert islands, psychiatrist, patient, and nasty boss, cowering employee, and this guy on the hood has been appearing. And do you like using those kind of forms? Does it give you something to play off of?
I think they're a great springboard, yeah. I think, if you're really, really stuck for something, kind of going back to the tropes is a good way to at least kind of get things moving a little bit.
Okay, here we go.
We're from Student Loans. We came to repo your BA.
I like his bathrobe.
The real joke is my student loan outstanding balance. It's more than I took out, and I graduated in 1999. Damn it, I think I just butt donated to a charity.
Butt donated.
Yes.
Okay.
Don't give me that look. It's fair trade. Oh, yeah? Well, what if I were the first man on Earth?
I should say cavemen and women are also one of those recurring things.
And this one is The Little Mermaid 10 years later. She is saying, I should have given you to the sea witch. Some prince you turned out to be, and rescuing you was the biggest mistake I ever made. And he is coming back with, I'm sick of running a tank whenever your mom visits. You haven't been to little anything in years. And I liked you much better when you were mute. To me,
I like the fish.
Yeah, my favorite thing about this cartoon is their half man, half mermaid child, which is a fish head and little human legs. And he's just so sad. I can't look at him.
He has a dreidel.
Sorry? And this is what I picked out as one of my favorites from the magazine. This is Paul Note. And the clown is saying, it doesn't mean I'm a sad clown, it means I killed a man in prison. I liked that in particular because I really figured if there was anything that the New Yorker demographic isn't particularly familiar with, it's prison tattoos.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I was thrilled.
I think that's fair.
As opposed to myself, who's super familiar.
Okay. Go ahead, Farley.
Today, class, I'm proud to announce my tenure. It's payback time.
Now let's break this down a little bit. It's a talking bowling pin and a worried bowling ball, and they're members of the mafia.
Well, they're like a gang, I think.
They're like a gang,
They
okay.
hang out in this alley. They finally got their mark.
How do you come up with that?
Drugs.
Yeah. Really?
No.
Would be a first.
I think if you're doing 15 cartoons every week, you go to weird places. This human experiment has gone on long enough. Give the hippos control.
This is another trope. God, the interplay between a god and an angel looking down on planet Earth. Next one.
Nobody wants to hang out with Bedbug Man. He's the saddest superhero. I'm not technically a quote-unquote lawyer, but I do own a paper shredder and have visited several prisons.
Farley, this style, it's something you choose? It's what comes out of the pen? How does this work?
Yeah, again, it's something from, you just draw, if you draw enough cartoons, do it enough, you can't really control what's coming out. So this is the gross thing that happens. Sorry.
Okay.
This is why you read the instructions. Product placement in the cartoon, you're crazy. Crazy delicious, like a smooth, refreshing Pepsi Cola.
Yeah. I had an experience with product placement like this cartoon. I remember one time a few years ago that an advertiser, Target, bought every ad in the magazine, and there's nothing wrong with it. They paid for the real estate, and then there came time to choose the cover, and I chose the cover, and it had a red and white beach ball on the cover, and I thought nothing of it. And for the next 6 weeks, I was accused of giving the cover over to Target. I didn't even make the connection. This one I made the connection. Next.
Oh, dear Lord, no, there had to have been another way.
Drugs weren't involved in that? Okay.
I'm sorry, this is literally my first rodeo. Oh my God, I just remembered I can fly. This cartoon, I got some interesting mail about this cartoon. There was a basketball player for the DePauw State, and there was an interview with him in the Chicago newspaper, and he was saying that like he hit a dry spell, he's doing horribly, and his coach showed him an inspirational cartoon. And that was I just did this cartoon because it's like the dumbest superhero. Been there for years. And it was also, on a more serious note, like a website called Women in Recovery that put this cartoon up and said that it was inspiring to them. I'm not tearing up here. Right? Yeah, that
just
this cartoon,
confused.
During recovery, someone saw this cartoon and said, I can fly. This is like a hard time, and it's an inspirational cartoon, which is great. But I did this at 4 a.m. about a stupid superhero. So I'm glad that it had an alternate meaning.
Show us, how do you work? Is it 4 o'clock in the morning your normal time to work, or you wake up in the middle of a fever dream and find that?
Well, now I try to do it at more reasonable hours, but I think I did this when I was working as Bob's assistant full time. So I would do the cartoons at night and come in during the day.
What does it involve being Bob's assistant? I've never understood this.
You got to chew his food. He's got luxurious hair. You got to make sure that there are no knots. This is a George Bluth cartoon that really spoke to me. It says, "None of us is happy all the time, Farley." And there's a sad clown whose name is Farley, and looking the way that I do, you connect.
Okay, Zach. I think they understood it.
What's
They
that?
understood it.
Oh yeah.
Now, don't any of you take this the wrong way. But if you go back to the New Yorker a half a century ago, it seemed to be a radically different goal for a lot of the artists. There was a kind of what you would call the beautiful style, Peter Arno or something like that. People who had, whose goal was to be hyper-realistic, Charles Adams too. And here I don't want to generalize about it, and certainly it's not for people who draw the same way, but there's a grungier approach. Why do you suppose that there's been a movement toward that way? And there's a lot of artists like this, and some are a little older as well in that direction.
I mean, I think this is funnier to draw this way. I think those cartoons, there's a lot of great jokes in them, and they look beautiful. And also these are blanket statements. There were some people in like Thurber who had just line drawings that were sort of just part of the drawing would just sort of float off. And some people now who draw, like Matt Diffie draws hyper-realistically. It depends on the kinds of jokes you're making. And so like when I started, my first couple cartoons are sort of when they were like German expressionist style, sort of. And like when my third cartoon was a joke where it was a coffin that was really poorly made, and like a hand sticking out of it at a funeral, and this woman says, Harry insisted on doing everything himself. But in that cartoon, I had drawn a guy with a head that was just like bigger than everybody else's head, because I thought that was funny, and but that had nothing to do with the joke. And so I had to sort of reel it in a little bit and figure out what is the medium ground that I can do. Cartoons where someone's arm is really long and that is the joke, and cartoons where I can just do like, a standard line and they don't look so crazy that you're confused why they look crazy. I want to be feared as a tyrant, loved as a father, and revered as a god, but I also want them to think I'm funny.
Kind of a credo for cartoonists. Next.
Whoa, hold the phone. You're telling me that this whole time you've just been making up the horoscopes? There's some people who do not get this because they don't believe the horoscopes are made up.
There is nothing funnier than death, is there? Okay.
Sharon, if we can fit another mirror in there, it'll look like his teeth go on forever. I don't just stop being your co-pilot when the plane lands around here. This was the first time I had drawn sort of diaphanous shades flowing in the wind. So, milestone.
What else is there to say? Okay.
Over, damn you, over.
Now, Drew had the limbo joke. See how they're resonating?
Limbo, I mean, people look funny when they're doing the limbo, so
They
it's
do.
hard to good. And horses also.
Is a horse hard to draw?
Sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. That's a terrible answer. Like, if I've drawn a bunch of horses, then it's real easy to draw. And then if I've gone a couple months without drawing a horse, it looks so bad.
Okay.
The tail's half at the back. Good stripper cop, bad stripper cop. It's important to note that this cop, the bad stripper cop, is so bad that he took off a pair of pants and is still wearing a pair of pants. Also, he brought a gun into the interrogation room, which is just bad for a cop, I would think. I can feel the baby kicking.
That's a beautiful baby.
Yeah. You wanted to role play. I can't help it if the doctor would be medically obligated to say something about your weight.
I think I got a couple of letters about that.
He brought a stethoscope, so it's sexy. This is the one I like. You would not believe what Bobby Baxter wants for Christmas.
Yenta Claus. Yenta Claus. Now this is Danny Shanahan.
Yeah, and I love a lot of the cartoons. I think they're really funny, but Danny Shanahan, for some reason, is the only cartoonist who can make me like laugh out loud, just because of the way he draws rosy cheeks and like drunk people. They just look so insane with like bug eyes. This Santa made me laugh really hard when I saw him. He was so excited to tell this little girl about what Bobby Baxter wants.
When you guys started, it reminds me of when I was looking at Roz Chaff's book. She has a big book of cartoons, and she's been doing this for quite a long time. And I look at her very earliest cartoons, and they're nothing, absolutely nothing like the Roz Chaff world that developed. But these early things were highly abstract, a little strange, and yet somebody at the magazine had the foresight, not me, to take them, and she developed. When you're thinking down the line, you guys have all been doing, I guess, Drew, you've been at it the longest of the four of you, but do you think about that at all, or is it just rough to rough and week to week? What is the ambition that you're after, other than throwing a grenade, known as a cartoon each week?
I know I just don't want to, for myself, I don't want to try and force myself into some kind of, like Charles Barsati does. He has like 5 or 6 characters that basically his cartoons deal with the same characters over and over again with different, in different scenarios.
Dogs.
Right.
Kings.
The evil, big, fat, evil
Kings
boss.
on a psychiatrist's
Right.
couch. Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to try and force myself into something like that, but I do try, and I don't want to get stale. I don't want to get. I want to be able to, challenge myself to not kind of repeat the same, humor over and over again.
Anybody else?
I wouldn't say I see myself like consciously changing or evolving. When I look back at like the first few things I started submitting, it's like I was kind of trying to go for a funnier drawing style, and it's very awkward. It really doesn't work at all. And I sort of quickly evolved into kind of what I'm using now, which I don't think I draw particularly funny. You draw really, really funny. You're good. But it's, but I can't see myself like being able to make that, huge of an arc of transformation. I try to make it funny, but within, the parameters of my style.
You write for Saturday Night Live. Is that harder, easier? Is there any overlap, any similarity between the two?
It's different. There's a little overlap. You're writing jokes, for both, and sometimes they're going to overlap, but I really try with the cartoons, you know, you want to tie it to the image in some way. You don't want just like a talking head saying a funny line. Writing with other people is different, and you also...
Good, bad, and different. I mean, what is that like? You must be strange to do that all of a sudden.
It's strange, yeah. After I stopped being Bob's assistant, I worked at home for about 4 years, and so it's weird to like put on pants and shirt every day. Like, I would usually put on one or the other. Like, in combination, it's really challenging. It's definitely fun to work with other people and sort of see how other people's minds work. And Farley and Drew and I did that a little bit with the blog for the New Yorker for a little bit, and that was really fun to play off each other. I mean, that's a place where humor really thrives. But with the cartoons, you really have complete autonomy over what you're doing, which is, you know, sort of as an artist in a comic, that's a fun and sort of exciting thing to see that in there and know that you did that completely. And also at Saturday Night Live, you're doing it for a live audience, so every joke has to get a laugh. Whereas in the New Yorker, you can, you know, that clown joke with the funeral, it can take like a second. People can think about it because it's really complicated and smart. A bunch of dead clowns. But you know, it's a different kind of joke in that way. You're not just going for a big laugh necessarily.
Well,
That reminds me, I've sort of seen the New Yorker in a live format. I was sitting on the train, the subway, and there was someone reading that week's magazine, and they were coming up to my cartoon. So I was like, oh, this is it. And I waited, and I missed my stop, and she kept reading. I was like waiting for it. And she was,
we're going to take questions from you. Is there a microphone out? Yeah? Do we have anybody?
I have just a two-part question. Like, do you ever show your cartoons before you send them in to friends to see like what the reaction is? And my second question is, do you guys ever do covers for the New Yorker?
A little louder if you could lift the mic. I got it. One is about do you ever do covers? I think the answer is no. I don't think any of you have done. Did we see cover sketches from you?
I've drawn mustaches on some of the covers.
All right. Do you think it's such a radically different thing? I mean,
I think it's a lot more time consuming. I've sent in cover submissions, and it takes a lot more to
hear from us.
It's a little bit different kind of joke also. It's
right.
a subtler joke sometimes. You know, you don't have a caption. And...
Right. Should you show stuff to friends before sending it in? That was a yes. Okay.
Hi, David. A two-part question. One, what is your criteria when it boils down to the final selection for you to choose what goes into each week? And also, what's your relationship or intercourse with the staff or the people that submit? You can take that any way you want.
What's my intercourse with what?
With the staff.
With the staff.
Or with the
That's called a
cartoonist.
hostile workplace environment.
Well, then tell us about it.
It has to make you laugh. Here's the scene. This meeting takes place in the afternoons on Wednesdays. Bob Mankoff is there, and he brings 3 baskets. Yes, no, and maybe. I swear to God, it's as complex as that. This is work for grown people.
Like King Solomon.
Yeah, like King Solomon. Only we can't cut it in even in half.
Oh.
And Bob has whittled down hundreds of roughs. You guys would know better how many on a given week, but it can be hundreds. With an attempt to have the regulars have a shot at it. You know, people whose names you probably know, Gahan Wilson or Roz Chast or whoever it may be. Certainly the younger core have a good shot at it, but also an attempt to bring in people we've never seen before, which may be giving them an extra boost because sometimes it's not even remotely ready, but you want to see those people and you want to begin to recognize them. So maybe the 15th time around you say yes, in the same way that Roger Angel, having seen the 15th short story of Ann Beattie, said not only yes that time, but Ann Beattie became a kind of staple fiction writer for The New Yorker for many years, especially in the 70s and 80s. So and all you can go on is your gut and your wits, and if I'm on the fence about something, or Bob especially likes something, that'll sort of push my hand. But he's done his work for the most part. And there's also somebody else sitting there named Sylvia Killingsworth, who's what's called the A-issue editor. And she's in charge of doing something called cartooning the issue. In other words, she's responsible for in a given issue. She's there to laugh, by the way. It's a good thing to have a critical mass of laughter. But also, in a given issue, you don't want to have, Zach may want it, but you don't want to have 15 cartoons by Zach, or you don't want 15 cartoons that are about one thing. You want a different rhythm and different contributors and as much of a mix as you can possibly get. That's the way it goes. As for the intercourse question, I'm not answering that.
But thank you.
My question is about the user submission captions are usually that are in the back.
You're talking about the cartoon caption contest on the back page.
Correct.
You guys know how that's done?
Yeah, Zach and I each did about 2 years reading all of those captions.
We didn't have final say.
Yeah, we just whittled. We read as most of them. Some of them, a lot of them are duplicates, or a lot of them are about things that certainly wouldn't be published, or sort of that intercourse type things.
If you write the Geico commercial tagline, that's the first thing that gets taken out. There's like 300 people every week turn into Geico.
Really?
Yeah. So you just search for Geico and you can eliminate all of those.
As a cartoonist,
We would read most of them, and then the ones that weren't the Geico captions, and then give Bob.
But if you're asking how they got there in the first place.
yes, as a cartoonist.
Yeah, some of these, look, these guys are doing, I don't know how many roughs you each do, but a lot, and there's many more of them. And not all of them make it, but sometimes there's a odd drawing that just, its incongruity lends itself to a broad number of captions. That's the way it works. No more questions? No more answers? Thanks for coming. We'll see you again soon.